You dive in, Olivia?
Let's go for it.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. July 22nd, COVID-19 update. We have an update on City Place to come after the COVID-19 discussion as well. But as we like to do on Wednesdays, we're going to start our discussion with our local public health expert and leader, Dr. Stephen Leffler, the President and Chief Operating Officer of the UVM Medical Center. Thank you, Dr. Leffler. And before we dive into the COVID update, I want to just thank you for your partnership on the announcement we had last Thursday, declaring racism a public health emergency here in the Burlington area, and the leadership that you personally and the hospital is playing in that effort. It was a hopeful day, and the hospital's partnership there is one of the big things that made it hopeful. Looking forward to soon being able to share with the public where we go from here with that. That was in no way a kind of one-off. This is something we intend to have the kind of sustained attention to that we put to the opioid crisis and others. But I just want to say again, thank you. I haven't seen you since the event, and it was good to have you there.
Thank you. It was an honor to be there with you. Thank you for your leadership.
Olivia, let's look at the map. So there is the COVID Act Now map, which anyone who tunes into these briefings know we pay a lot of attention to this map. It's generated by data scientists and academics from Georgetown and some other academic institutions. And it paints a pretty clear picture of the nation really struggling to contain this virus, especially in the South, in the West. The Northeast, you can see, is doing better. The light yellow there is an indication that there is what COVID Act Now, the website, calls controlled disease growth. Vermont often has been green on this map, as viewers have seen in the past. We went yellow this morning. If you click down into the various layers of information, you'll see Vermont is barely in the yellow, and I think there's some good reason to think trends will take us back into the green fairly soon. I think it still tells the story here. The Northeast is doing better. The graph on the right shows that Vermont in the last 30 days, what it means to be ranked 51 in cases means we have per capita the least number of cases. I think our rolling average has been about 11 cases a day statewide. Another week under our belt with the local picture, in stark contrast to the national picture, being pretty favorable from my sense. What are you seeing there, Dr. Leffler? Is any modifications you'd put on that?
No, I think that's a very good description of where the Northeast and Vermont particularly finds itself. I would say the concerning thing on that map is the colors getting hotter, meaning there's more COVID across more of the United States. More states are struggling with increasing number of cases, and it's coming almost like it's sort of coming back in a wave back towards the Northeast. To remind people, initially there was a big outbreak up in the Northwest in Seattle. California had some early cases, and then really New York was the epicenter of COVID through March, April, and part of May. And then the New England states and New York really got it markedly under control, and then it's been spreading across the country. And so I was just got off a phone call with Commissioner Levine, and we were talking about how it almost feels like it's kind of pushing back towards the east, and so something to keep a very close eye on. And if you just look at our data over the past week or so, for the first time in a little while, we've had some days where we've had 10 positives. Yesterday we had 7 positives in the state of Vermont. I just saw a thing saying today it was back down to 2. So not huge numbers, but overall a little more COVID in the state than we had for a month or so.
I think we have another image that shows that point.
Yep.
Here's the Chittenden County daily numbers, which is exactly what you described there. Just a very slight uptick in that 7-day rolling average line, the dark line. Still, well under 10 as an average if you look just at Chittenden County. And I think we have one more image from the dashboard that says the same thing. Olivia, if you want to click forward to that. This is the percentage of the positive test rate, which, you can see we're still down there. I think this is a county number as well. Maybe not. This might be a statewide number showing we're down there under 1% or right around 1%.
Couple interesting things I thought I'd share today. By tomorrow, the state of Vermont will have done a total of 85,000 COVID tests since this started. That's a pretty amazing number for a small state like Vermont. And most days right now, Vermont's doing about 1,000 tests per day. So not an insignificant number. I also saw some data this week on, as people are aware on this call, we're doing testing for all of our procedures right now. So everybody who's going to get a procedure at the hospital gets a test beforehand. And by definition, all these people are getting procedures are totally asymptomatic. They completely screen negative for COVID based on temperature or any risk factors. And we've looked at all the data, and that's a couple thousand cases now. And the positivity rate for totally asymptomatic Vermonters is 0.1%. So about 1 in 1,000 people in Vermont who are totally asymptomatic, have no symptoms whatsoever, do not think they have COVID. That's the positivity rate. It's probably relatively accurate for the state in the way that we're doing it, but I thought that was really interesting information to share.
That really is. That is what I not heard it said that way before, Dr. Leffler. So, what is that? That says that it, kind of says to me, you should be careful that 1 in 1,000 is a pretty small number, but it's not 0. That you don't quite know the person you're engaging with. There is a chance. It kind of reinforces, I think, the feeling we all have that we have to be careful as we go about our lives. The risk is low, but not 0.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the way to think about it. The risk is very low, but it's not 0. And these are people, once again, who have no thought whatsoever they have COVID, and they're getting a procedure. So I think that's interesting information. That's really, I would say, the baseline activity of COVID in Vermont right now for people who are totally unaware they might have it.
Excellent. All right. So a couple, one of the things I really appreciate, I think it's a real resource for the community, is Dr. Leffler, is to hear your take on the just evolving science that unfolds every week. We've never seen a science story quite like this, I don't think. The news this week is that 3 different vaccine manufacturers, producers, reported some level of encouraging progress this week. How excited should we be about this? Does it change the timeline in any way that you've been kind of projecting for us? How good is this news?
So this is really good news, and we should be moderately excited. And here's why I say that. So here's what we know. We know the science is working. We know that we can use a vaccine and have people develop antibodies to COVID-19. So that's good news. We know there's multiple different ways now for people to generate antibodies.
Yeah, I mean, let's pause it. That's not a given, right? I mean, there are like the AIDS virus was famously, we don't have a vaccine despite enormous efforts. So
it's not a given. And so the other thing I think is exciting is like the platform they're using for AstraZeneca is a platform that's used for very many other vaccines. So it should be safe. It's used for millions of doses a year. So it's not something that's totally novel that we don't have a good sense of the overall risk.
What does that mean, the platform? What is that? What kind of?
When people get a vaccine, there's a lot of different, we could have a whole hour on the pharmacology of vaccines, but they're made either by using chicken eggs, or there's a bunch of different ways they make the vaccine. And then some of that protein is carried with the vaccine into your body when they inject you. And in the past, some of them have been very dangerous, way in the past. More recently, they've really made them much, much safer. But I know for some of the COVID testing, they're using some very new, exciting techniques to speed up the process. That could potentially, very slightly, make somebody sick. But the one AstraZeneca is using is a well-established, extremely safe vaccine mechanism. And so not only is it making antibodies in people, I think we can be as sure you can be on any of these right now that it's going to be a safe vaccine for people. And so that means two things to me. First off, you have to realize that COVID-19 for most people is a big inconvenience. For some people, it's a life-threatening illness, and for some people, they die from it. But for most people, when they get COVID, they may get pretty sick, but they're going to get better. The vaccine has to have lower risk by a lot than the illness. I would be shocked if the AstraZeneca vaccine didn't meet that criteria, meaning it's much safer than getting COVID. So that's really, really important. Here's the issue now is there's a huge difference between seeing someone make some antibodies and knowing it prevents you from contracting COVID-19. And the only way you really know that is when they do what they call stage 3 trials. So there's 3 stages. Stage 2 means you're making antibodies. Stage 3 means they get a lot of people to become vaccinated, and then they see what happens. They see how many people have been vaccinated actually catch COVID. Some people get a control or a placebo, and they got a shot, but they didn't get the vaccine. We see how many of those people catch COVID-19. And then other people get the vaccine, and we see how well it works. And we won't honestly know that until we have a lot of people that were vaccinated in an area with quite a bit of COVID. It takes some time that's called efficacy. And so that's a long answer to this allows us to move to stage 3 trials. And because there's a lot of COVID in the country right now, we can probably accelerate the results a little bit, but we won't really know how well these work, honestly, until 6 or 8 months after people start getting it, the vaccine.
I hadn't thought about there being that small silver lining of the failure to suppress the viruses that we'll be able to test the vaccine potentially more quickly and effectively.
Yeah, exactly. So I saw on the news, that AstraZeneca could be potentially ready with the vaccine as early as October.
Wow.
Which is amazing. I mean, it's almost a miracle how fast they've been able to move it along. But we will not actually know it's true how well it actually stops people from catching COVID in October. We'll probably have a directional sense. And I think we'll be very confident that it's a safe vaccine. But actually knowing, does it prevent it 98% of the time? Does it do it for a year? We won't know that for a year.
Very interesting. All right, that's great. Thank you for that deep dive into where we stand with the vaccine. The other important, I think, study out this week that is a little, is basically consistent with our past conversations, but a little bit more pessimistic than at least I was hoping with respect to the transmission and susceptibility of the really the transmission of the disease by children, is this massive study of nearly 65,000 people that came out of South Korea this week, which confirmed, my take on it was that it confirms that children 9 and under do transmit the virus at a much lower rate, maybe half the rate of others, or even, maybe even a little better than that. But once kids get to about age 10 and older, they spread the virus more like adults. And that has implications to this big conversation we're having right now about the safe reopening of schools. It was interesting. I felt like you were ahead of the curve again, Dr. Leffler, and last time we talked about this, you kind of projected that maybe we would find that this was happening in part just because of the physical characteristics of the children, them being smaller. It seems like the height at which they breathe may be having some impact. So I thought it was a very timely study, not entirely positive, but we want to know the bad news as well as the good news here, right?
I think this builds on the conversation that we had last week. Probably the size of your lungs, the size of your airway, the strength of your cough, probably has an impact on how easily you're able to spread COVID-19. And so, interestingly, by the time you're 12 or 13, most kids have nearly full-size lungs. You're exactly right. They're taller. Although I would tell you that a bunch of 8-year-olds are all at the same level to spread it, right? 10-year-olds the same. And so it is true, as you get older, kids are more adult size in terms of closer to our height. But I think this still sticks with viral load is an important thing to think about. So smaller children have smaller lungs. They have less virus in their lungs. They can't cough as far. And so it's probably a social distancing type of situation that helps them not spread COVID as much. To your point about schools, I think this builds on the fact that we know it's better for kids to go to school in person if it's possible. And so I think it makes us think about using this information. Is there a way to do that safely for our children, for their teachers, and all the staff at the schools, and when they come home from school, for their grandparents and so on? And so I think if we can, I see this as adding to the body of knowledge. So if we know that 10 and up seems to spread the virus at about adult-like rates, we're going to have to, we're going to have kids go to school, which is our goal, we're going to have to build things into the school system in ways to lower the transmission risk.
And if you kind of combine elements of this conversation, if you combine the general status of the virus here in Vermont right now, this could change, but right now where 1 in 1,000 asymptomatic people are testing positive, that does suggest to me that the goal of having schools open, even for older kids in some fashion this fall is appropriate for Vermont right now. I think I worry, the national debate on this is so screwed up with just the irresponsible way in which President Trump and Secretary DeVos have waded into this. And I think it's made it harder to have a science-based, evidence-based discussion about, what's right for Vermont right now. I will share, I talked with Superintendent Tom Flanagan earlier today, and I was encouraged, by the conversations that are taking place in Chittenden County, the leaders of the school district. I know a lot of people are working hard to find the right way forward here in Chittenden County schools. I think there's starting to be some announcements about that, and I think Burlington, there'll be more announcements soon. It does seem to me, the science suggests, I think it's encouraging that younger children are transmitted less, and in that we think that lines up well with the fact that in-person education is even more important for younger students. It's harder to do good remote learning for children 9 and under. So feels to me like, given where we are in Vermont with the virus and what the science is saying, I'm hopeful for our kids this fall.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think, that to the extent possible, making our decisions based on science, understanding of the data, the prevalence of disease in Vermont right now, and then a risk discussion. So to be clear, as we do more things, that 1 in 1,000 person that's out there with COVID, as they're interacting with more other parts of society, that does increase the risk for other people to catch it and increases the risk for a super spreader event. But as we've been talking about over and over every week on this, we're expecting little spikes and surges. When we have those, if we can quickly get that person out of the system, meaning home and safe and not spreading to other people, and then do really good contact tracing to get their contacts back home from school or whatever, I think there are ways to do this rationally. And we're building the same system for the hospital right now. We're planning for a fall and winter where we have some COVID here, but we're going to do our very best not to shut down all hospital operations again like we did before. That's not good for Vermonters either. We know people had illnesses they were staying home with. We know it had issues for some of our patients who have mental health issues. So I think we have to be thoughtful about building a model where we can keep as much going as we reasonably can. And it all comes down to washing your hands, masking, social distancing, not expensive things to do, right? And I do think we can have ways to have as many things open as possible, but we have to be willing to ramp it up and down as COVID waxes and wanes.
All right, Dr. Leffler, thank you for that. I think we're gonna have to leave it there. We'll let you go. We'll see you again soon. We may take a week off next week, but we'll be back in a couple. And thank you. It's always great to have you on.
See you soon.
Just one more note on the virus containment, virus suppression that I know is on a lot of people's minds. As we've talked about before, one of the ways in which this positive status of the virus suppression in Vermont could change is through travelers coming here from out of state, from these areas of the country that are seeing larger amounts of virus circulation than we are, and certainly the return of students this fall to the colleges is something that could become a significant spreading event if it's not managed right. And I've heard from many constituents raising questions about this. I want to just give a brief update on where the planning is for this right now. This is a preliminary kind of update, just knowing the level of concern in the community about these questions right now. We are planning a longer, kind of more extensive update when a few of the remaining questions and work has been sorted out in the first week of August. But here's where it is now. There is a robust, coordinated effort underway between the four kind of critical agencies here: the city of Burlington, the state of Vermont, UVM, and Champlain College. We worked together on the June 1 Box-It-In plan, which was successful from my perspective, and that we did not see a big spike after students returned for the turnover apartments in June. And we are trying to apply those same principles of that plan to this bigger effort of continuing to box in the virus as a substantially larger number of students return to Burlington in the fall, and as in-person classes return, some of which will be inside and have the possibility of virus spread, these boxing in strategies become even more important. The colleges are clearly planning significant efforts on campus, and we are in conversations with them as well about the behavior of off-campus students and what is going to be expected of students in the historic neighborhoods around the colleges. Again, we'll have more detail in August. I do just want people to know that these conversations are happening, and just share from my perspective that they have been reassuring conversations to this point. Clearly, a lot of planning is being done by UVM and Champlain College. Clearly, they are mobilizing substantial amounts of resources to implement the testing, tracing, isolation, and quarantine. And in particular, I've been impressed by the testing plans, which are resource intensive given the way testing works now. But both colleges are committed to a lot of testing, and we'll talk more about the details coming up, but I think that alone should be encouraging. And if it's well integrated into those other strategies, I really think we've got, as we've talked about before in these briefings, as long as we stay coordinated and keep our focus as a community and among institutions in this case, we know that this is a virus that can be contained. There are many societies that are succeeding at keeping it contained. We should be able to do that here in Burlington. So I think that's all I got for now on this. But I do just want, again, I just want people to know a lot of work is going into this now. Full update to come first week in August. I think that is what we have for the, with respect to the virus efforts right now. So now I want to turn and share an important update about the City Place project. And I've got a extended statement I'm going to share with you, and then I will take questions from the media about the virus if there's more on that, and City Place. So here we go. So for nearly 2 years, Brookfield, the largest real estate developer in the world in 2019, and the managing partner of City Place Burlington project, has made public, private, and written commitments to resume the stalled project and complete a transformative redevelopment of the former mall. Since last November, these commitments have included providing materials in support of the city's testimony to the Vermont Economic Progress Council, describing Brookfield's intention to start construction of a modified project in August, meetings with members of the public, making similar representations in January and February of this year, and most recently a letter to me on June 4th confirming the company's intention to work in good faith to put a new development agreement in place by the end of this month. Despite repeatedly affirming its commitment to the project, and with its promises to the city unfulfilled, at the end of last week, it became clear that Brookfield is pursuing steps to abandon management of the project and return Don Sinex and his Devonwood Investors Group to that role. That result would be unacceptable to the city of Burlington because it would constitute a breach of faith and a betrayal of trust. Brookfield should keep its commitment to the people of Burlington and see the project through to completion, as it has repeatedly promised. If it does not, the city will do everything in our power to see that Brookfield suffers consequences for this breach. On Saturday, after consultation with City Council President Max Tracy, I directed our attorneys to issue a default letter documenting Brookfield's failure to perform pursuant to the development agreement and alleging bad faith and fraud. Further, The default notice includes a hold on the destruction of communications and documentation to preserve materials for possible litigation. I'm releasing this default letter publicly today. We will be posting it shortly after this press briefing. In a lawsuit, the city would, at a minimum, seek city ownership of the land for the reconnection of St. Paul and Pine Streets and damages for the developer's failure to rebuild and upgrade 8 blocks of public infrastructure in time to use tax increment financing. The TIF law includes certain deadlines that may be impossible to meet because of the developer's inactions, and thus endangers the ability to construct the planned $20.8 million in new public infrastructure. Brookfield has paid and reimbursed the city for approximately $500,000 of costs since its delays began, compensating the city for all expenditures related to the developer's delays and supporting downtown marketing efforts since the delays began in 2018. The city will pursue continued reimbursement for the city's additional costs as this proceeds. In addition, the city will use all available mechanisms to ensure that this site, though privately owned, this is not publicly owned land, it is privately owned land, we're still going to use all available mechanisms to ensure that it is transformed into a vibrant mixed-use neighborhood as soon as possible. In response to the notice of default, Brookfield's attorneys have initiated new contacts with the city. We will give the developers a short window of time to return with an acceptable proposal for moving forward with the project. If an acceptable proposal is not forthcoming, I will protect the city's interests and achieve the city's long-standing public goals for this project through aggressive legal action. With that, in one sec, I will take some questions.
Our first question today is from Liam at VPR. And Liam, you should be able to enable your microphone now.
Hi, Mayor. So when you say Brookfield reestablished contact with the city, can you be a little bit more specific? I mean, what exactly did they say, and what are they promising or talking about doing now?
What I'm talking about, Liam, is they got this default letter on Saturday. Their lawyer reached out to explore whether there's a route to avoiding litigation. And so we've had brief conversations with them since. I do think there are numerous ways in which Brookfield could avoid litigation, and we're encouraging them to do so, but they have very little time for that at this point, after so much time has passed already, and given their recent actions.
How much time are you giving them?
I don't think, Liam, I expect we'll have an update on this, probably not in the remaining time this month in July, but we're talking days or a short number of weeks here, and you should expect another update on where we are with this, certainly in August.
Days in a couple of weeks. I mean, that is like, is it a couple of weeks you're looking to hear back from them?
Liam, I think the exact timeline will depend on what Brookfield does. If they take swift action to try to make it right with the city, we'll give the time to let that play out. If they continue to go down the path they have been, we may act very quickly.
And you've long supported this project, and you were supportive of Brookfield taking over. Are you not supportive of the project if Don Sinek's takes it over? Just sort of trying to get a sense of where you're at. I mean, it sounds like you're objecting to Brookfield pulling back from the project. I mean, do you still think Brookfield is actually committed to this project and would actually be willing to see it through if they respond to your letter and kind of work with the city going forward? Do you still have confidence in them as a company at this point?
So again, the reason we issued the default letter is because at the end of last week, it became very clear Brookfield is not currently intending to make good on their commitments, despite all the things that they have said in the past in numerous different forums. And that's why we sent the default. Brookfield is, the largest or one of the largest real estate development companies in the world. They clearly have the capacity to implement a project like this. They've done it many times in many parts of the world. It's within one of the reasons I have been supportive of working with them, giving them time to adjust the project and find a way forward, is because clearly they have the ability to do it. And while certainly our trust in their statements is very much shaken by recent events, if they were to, I think there's things they could do to change that if they chose to do so. I'm not saying that's necessarily likely. I do think they could do it, and there's a way for them to move forward. I think I answered your question there, Liam, but if you want to refine that, and I can try again.
I'm good for now. I'll let some other folks take a...
Okay, great.
Sure.
All right, we have, there's someone in there.
Do you have any questions here in the studio? Okay, good. The mayor's office. Go ahead.
Great. We have a full queue. So next up is Ross. Ross, you should be able to enable your microphone now.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you, Ross. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. So a bit of a two-parter. One is just, can you first explain what that communication was at the end of last week and how it became, clear to you that they were no longer committed to doing this project? And two, with this project being now delayed for years and frequently referred to as many as the giant downtown hole, what's the message to the community just about the fact that this is at best another delay on this, and at worst a full stop, uncertain future now for what's been a headache for many people in the city and even the greater Chittenden County community?
Thanks, Russ. So we, the final straw in this is a meeting that took place last Thursday, at which it was clear, Brookfield made it clear they were moving to sell their remaining interest and leave the managing role of the partnership. And that is the final event that led to the issuance of the default on Saturday. Clearly, yes, you're right. The fact that Brookfield is choosing, after all their past statements, to move in this direction is a setback. How big of a setback is to be determined. And the last statement that had been made by the developers about a project schedule had a 2021 construction start. Certainly it's within the ability of the developers to still keep that schedule if they respond to this default and start moving forward with the permitting work and financing work that is necessary to actually get this in the ground. Whether they will do that, whether they will find a way to do that, is entirely within their control, and we will see. Certainly, we are taking this step out of the sense that at this point, as a last resort, this is an action the city can take that may have some role accelerating decisions by the private developers about their partnership, about how they move forward, and that the act of default, could play a positive role in finally achieving some action from the developers. We'll just have to see how they respond and how this plays out.
Our next question is from Aiden. Aiden, you should be able to enable your microphone now.
Hey, so Ross actually took the question, one of the questions I was going to ask about what happened last week that really sparked this. But can you kind of expand on why the handoff back to Don is concerning from your point of view?
Why it's concerning?
Yep.
Well, look where we are. We for years worked hard, did everything the city was supposed to do in this public-private partnership to transform this problematic, declining suburban mall into a vibrant mixed-use neighborhood. This is land that the city doesn't own, but that if we're going to do it right, if we're going to restore the public streets and upgrade the public infrastructure around that area, the route to achieving that is through a public-private collaboration. And we were very committed to that. The city did everything it was supposed to do by the agreement, and we ended up in this place where construction started and then stopped, and now we've had 2 years of basically a dormant site. So that history came as a result of attempting to make this work with Don. So we do have concerns about trying that again, for sure. I think since a real chance this will become a matter of active litigation, I think that's what I can say about those concerns for now. I do encourage, there is an expansion on this in the default document that, again, will be posted after this conference.
So did Brookfield identify who they were going to sell to? Were they going to sell their 51% interest to Don or another party?
Yes, they made it clear that they were separating from Don. That there was, that there was, I think it's best since what we know, what is clear is that they were attempting to leave the partnership and put the management of it back in control of Don Sinix and Devin Wood. That's really what we know. We are not privy to the details of their partnership. So I'll leave it at that.
Our next question is from Dan, and Dan, you should be able to enable your microphone to ask your question directly now.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Dan. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, Mayor, have you talked to Don? Have you had a conversation with him about this turn of events?
Don was on this call I referenced last Thursday. It's the first time I've had any direct communication with Don Sinix for a long time. I was not on that call very long. I've not talked to him since.
I'm sorry, what was the last part there?
I have not talked to him since last Thursday. We've communicated our concerns. Clearly, I think he's well aware of them.
Okay, and the default letter, I'm sorry, could you just explain what leverage it gives you?
Well, I think it does several things, Dan. First of all, it makes abundantly clear that the developers, if they want the city to continue to play the role that we agreed to in that development agreement, if they want the city to invest up to $21 million of tax increment financing funds in the public infrastructure that runs through their property and is adjacent to their property, that they are losing their window to do that, and that we are not satisfied with the current state of the engagement with the city. And if they care about that $20 million investment, they better change directions quickly. It also lays out I think very clearly a detailed case for why Brookfield, if they continue down the path they are on and simply attempt to ignore the public and written commitments that they have made to this community, to the people of Burlington again and again, why that is something that they should suffer very severe consequences for. We have, we didn't rush to this decision in any way. For years, there had been calls for us to default Brookfield, and you've in past press conferences like this, I've explained why we weren't doing that. That the fastest route to redeveloping the site and achieving what the people of Burlington want on this site, a vibrant mixed-use neighborhood with jobs and homes and the generation of substantial new public revenues, that the route to getting there is to work with the property owner. And I think it made a lot of sense to, up until now, attempt to work with Brookfield. Again, clearly, this is a organization that has the capacity to deliver on that vision. And they were telling us up until last week that they intended to do so. And they told us that many times, in many settings, often in writing. That has all been detailed now in this default letter. And I believe we are in a very different position to pursue damages and remedies today as a result of those 2 years of good faith work on the city's part to see the project forward than we would have been if we acted sooner. So I think there's I think that lays it out there, Dan. Hope that's clear.
That's good. And one last thing, can you force the sale of that property to the city? I'm anticipating, what if it just sits there? Mm-hmm. Nothing happens. Don can't do anything. Brookfield won't do anything. Can you force a sale so the city can take over?
Well, I do think we have several routes for reclaiming the land that is on the official city map now as a result of the work that we have done in recent years, the rezoning, the vote of the public. I see there being several routes to securing the land for the reestablished St. Paul Street and Pine Street. You're asking a broader question: can the city actually, even though this is not public land, somehow get control of the site or force a sale in some way? I would say our options there are less clear and are hemmed in. Asking a broader question: law and decisions that the legislature has made to limit the ability of municipalities to exercise eminent domain. However, as I said in the statement, from my perspective, we care a lot about what happens on the site, that we care a lot about the continued dormancy of that site being as brief as possible. And we will use all available mechanisms to ensure that the scenario you laid out does not transpire. I will add tens of millions of dollars of private money, not city money. The city really, it's important for the public to understand, it's often misunderstood. The city has spent close to nothing in sort of out-of-pocket costs since the delays began. We, because of the agreements that we negotiated and put in place, we have received approximately $500,000 from Brookfield since the delays began to cover the city's costs and to even address some of the impacts on the downtown and the delays. The developers are in a very different place. They have spent tens of millions of dollars. We're told more than $50 million over the life of this project, and generally investment of that type creates real pressures to find a way to make a site productive. They're making zero income on this now. In fact, they have only major expenses on the site now. One would hope that the market forces at play, in addition to any leverage or pressure that the city can bring to bear from here, will limit the time that it is dormant. But, I would have said the same thing 2 years ago. I probably did say exactly the same thing 2 years ago. It's shocking that we are here 2 years later and the largest developer in the world has not found a way to make an investment in one of the most vibrant downtowns in America. And it is a great disappointment, and hopefully they will change course. This is within their ability to change course and get a project done.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Courtney, and this is the last question I have in the queue. So if I'm missing you, please send me an email and let me know. Courtney, you should be able to enable your microphone now.
Hi.
Hello, Courtney.
Sorry, Courtney, I accidentally muted you. I think you're unmuted.
Okay. Now. Great. So, Mayor, just to clarify, can you say what the city would be asking for in the lawsuit? What sort of remedies would the city be looking for?
If we get to litigation, I tried to articulate it in as much detail as I can at this point, Courtney, in the statement. Certainly, if we continue down this path, there will be further detail, but at a minimum, we will be seeking ownership of the land for reconnecting St. Paul and Pine Streets. We'll be seeking damages, compensation for not just having the land without cost, but actually funds to build the public infrastructure. That was what fundamentally the city is supposed to get out of this agreement that has been in place for years now, and that we've done everything that we were supposed to make good on this agreement. We were supposed to receive through this tax increment financing mechanism tens of millions of dollars to invest in the public infrastructure in the downtown that would greatly enhance and strengthen the downtown. If because of Brookfield's actions, that is no longer available to us, I think we're owed that money through other means, and I think it's their willful actions that have endangered the possibility of this financing. I think that's a big problem, and it's a big financial problem. It's $20.8 million in public infrastructure that were planned related to this development. Certainly, we're going to have more legal costs, more project management costs with Jeffrey Glassberg, with our attorneys, likely other out-of-pocket costs now as a continuation of the delays that began 2 years ago. We have been successful because of the commitments Brookfield has made in writing in the past in getting those dollars reimbursed up until now. We are going to seek continued payment from them for those costs, which are going to continue going forward. There may well be more in a suit, but that's what I'm confident in communicating to you now.
Great. And so you mentioned that the city has not spent a lot out of pocket since these delays began, but I guess arguably the city has lost out on property tax revenue since there's been nothing there. So do you have a sense of kind of how much the city has lost over the years in that sense? And would the city maybe attempt to recover that through litigation or other means?
Yeah, great, Courtney. The lost revenues, property tax revenues, is more modest than I think a lot of people believe it to be. We still receive, the property owners still owe one of the largest tax bills in the city on that site, even though it's currently vacant. Because the building was taken down, the approximately $800,000 a year in property taxes that site owed the city was reduced through reassessment by about $150,000 a year. That is revenue that I always want to make sure people understand has not, that foregone revenue going on 3 years now has not impacted the city's budget or the school's budget, in that those were revenues that, because of the history of this project, the long history of this property in Burlington's TIF district, that reduction in revenues was supposed to be and has been a short-term reduction in revenues flowing to the tax increment financing district. I do think that it is very much on the table and likely something we were already planning, as has been communicated previously publicly. There was only supposed to be a 1-year reduction in property tax payments. That was the developers promised continuous construction once the demolition began. So it was only supposed to be April of 2018 that there were the current level of reduced improvements on the site. So it's just supposed to be the one tax year following that April that there were reduced payments. I do think the developers are liable for the fact that that has stretched into more than a year, and that was something we had announced would be part of our negotiations in seeking a new development agreement. And if we are pursuing litigation, we will certainly be seeking to be made whole for that shortfall, which again hasn't been entirely within the developers' control, and that I see as clearly responsible for. Again, though, I hope that's clear. You get what I'm saying, right? These are revenues that don't sort of hit the kind of operating budgets or the city or the schools, because these are revenues flowing to the TIF district.
Yes, thank you. And then just another question. What do you need to see from Brookfield at the end of this kind of short time frame that you're giving them to prove themselves? What is it that you would need to see from them to show you that and to avoid litigation?
You know, Courtney, I think there's multiple different things they could do to make it clear that they were not abandoning the people of Burlington, that they were not abandoning these past commitments, and we're going to play a productive role in moving the site to the vision that has been promised. And so I'm going to, because of that, it's in their court, and they could come back in a number of ways that would satisfy me. They will have to satisfy not just me, but the city council, which is aware of this default, and which I think shares my frustrations with the developers. I'm not going to spell it out for them. They know what they need to do to turn this around and make good on their commitments.
Right. Is there anything you can say about, are there any actions the city could have taken before now to potentially prevent this from happening? I think like over the life of the project being stalled, people have raised concerns that the city has maybe been too accommodating to the developer. And I'm curious what you would say to that.
Yeah, I was trying to speak to this before. I mean, we have been clear over the last 2 years that ending the agreement, defaulting them, was something we had considered, and there were moments where we came close to that. But heretofore, a couple things had happened. One, it was our analysis, the analysis of the professionals that we have working on this project, that our shortest route to achieving the vision on the site that everyone wants of a mixed-use, vibrant neighborhood was that the best chance of getting that sometime soon came through working with the current property owners. They were the current property owner. They clearly had the capacity to do this. We weren't talking about working with some fly-by-night developer. This was, again, the largest real estate development company in the world, or at least they have been at times during the period we've been working with them. They've done projects like this again and again. I think it made a lot of sense to, I defend the actions that we took there. There were moments where we considered default. We articulated clear demands in the fall of 2019. Another moment where we were frustrated and were nearing separation, and they were responsive at that time. And the city got hundreds of thousands of dollars and improvements to the streetscape and significant reconceiving of the site, new design work that I think validated those prior decisions. The fact that I think that was the right decision at that time. At this time, when it became clear that everything that had been represented to us, about their commitment, they were moving away from, they really left. We always said this was the last option, the last resort, and we're at that last option now. I think we've done what we could throughout this process, given the limited role that the city plays here. I think it is something often misunderstood and worth remembering here that the way this agreement was structured, it was structured to protect taxpayers. It was structured so that the city's investment comes at the end. The risk is all being taken by the developers. The kind of flip side of that is the action is all in the hands of the developers at this point of the project to move forward. And the city's ability to accelerate the project is limited. So the good news in that is that taxpayers have been protected. The bad news in that is when you have a developer that for whatever reason does not move the project forward, the city's recourse is limited. We will be testing the limits of that as we move forward if we do resort to aggressive legal action. And we will be using every mechanism we can to see that the dormancy from here is as limited as possible.
And then just my final question would be, there was some action on the site yesterday. Can you just clarify what that was or is maybe still happening there?
My understanding is there's been some activity on the site related to the fact that the encumbrance permit that the developers have to occupy parts of the right-of-way and to compensate the city for occupying parts of the right-of-way for construction activities is going to expire soon. And given that construction is not underway, we've made it clear that we expect the right-of-way to be even more fully returned. They did partially return the right-of-way to the city in the fall of last year, but there were still some impacts. They are now taking steps to further reduce those impacts on the public right-of-way.
Does that mean they're rebuilt? They're I don't know. Are they rebuilding the street or no? The St. Paul and Pine.
My limited understanding, Courtney, of the kind of technical elements of this is that yes, they did need to rebuild elements of their site to properly retain the I believe there is some rebuilding that they needed to do largely on their property, I believe, to properly reinforce the returned public right-of-way. that's my understanding of it. If you want to, Jeffrey Glassberg, the city's consultant on this, could give you some additional detail there if you're seeking that.
Okay, that's it for me.
Okay.
And I believe that's all we have for today as well.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate seeing a big group on the Zoom today, and we will be back in touch as soon as there's more to share about the situation with City Place. As I said in my answer to the questions, I do not expect there to be a further update before the remainder of this July is done, but I certainly expect there will be considerably more discussion as we in August, and we will keep the public informed of material developments. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see everybody again soon.